2 years passed before Marcus encountered any sign of the dragon civilization again. His official reports had been met with skepticism by the colonial administration, despite the photographic evidence of the cave paintings and his detailed medical logs. The bureaucrats classified his discovery as preliminary, findings requiring further investigation, effectively burying the matter in red tape while they focused on more immediately profitable ventures like mining operations and terraforming projects. Marcus continued his xenobiological surveys across HFY, cataloging the planet's diverse ecosystem, while secretly hoping for another encounter with the dragon species. The crystalline caverns became a regular stop on his research routes, though they remained empty of their former inhabitants. Sometimes he would find small offerings left behind, unusual geometric arrangements of crystals or rare minerals that seemed too deliberate to be natural formations. These discoveries gave him hope that the dragons remembered his kindness, even if they chose to remain hidden. The breakthrough came during a routine atmospheric survey in the planet's northern hemisphere. Marcus was piloting his research shuttle through a mountain range when his instruments detected unusual energy signatures emanating from a hidden valley. As he descended for a closer look, the landscape below took his breath away. Vast spires of cultivated crystal formations stretched toward the sky, their surfaces pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that created a symphony of color, visible even in daylight. This was clearly the heart of dragon civilization, a city of living crystal tended by creatures whose intelligence and artistry far exceeded anything Marcus had imagined. Dozens of dragons moved through the aerial spaces between the crystal towers, their wings catching and reflecting the prismatic light in dazzling displays. The sight was so beautiful that Marcus found himself weeping, overwhelmed by the privilege of witnessing something no other human had ever seen. His wonder turned to concern when he noticed military-grade vehicles approaching from the south. Colonial security had somehow tracked his flight path and was deploying a full tactical response team toward the Dragon City. Marcus realized with growing horror that his discovery had been leaked, possibly through surveillance of his shuttle's navigation logs. The administration had decided to make contact on their own terms, which invariably meant a show of force designed to establish human dominance. Marcus immediately opened communications with the approaching fleet, identifying himself and requesting an immediate halt to their advance. Colonel Harrison, the mission commander, curtly informed him that he was no longer in charge of first contact protocols. The military had evidence of a potentially hostile alien civilization and was authorized to use whatever means necessary to secure human interests on Kepler 442b. Desperate to prevent a catastrophe, Marcus pushed his shuttle to maximum speed and arrived at the Dragon City minutes ahead of the military convoy. He landed in what appeared to be a central plaza, surrounded by towering crystal formations that hummed with harmonic resonances. Dragons began to gather around his shuttle, their postures alert but not aggressive. Among them, Marcus spotted a familiar silhouette, the distinctive wing pattern and scarring that identified his former patient. The dragon approached his shuttle with obvious recognition, its amber eyes bright with what appeared to be joy. Marcus opened his hatch and stepped out, raising his hands in the universal gesture of peaceful intent. The dragon responded by lowering its great head in the same greeting ritual they had shared in the cavern. Other dragons moved closer, their vocalizations creating a complex symphony of communication that seemed to be discussing the human visitor. Marcus tried to warn them about the approaching military force, using hand gestures and simple vocalizations to convey urgency. The dragon he had healed seemed to understand, turning to address its companions in rapid musical tones. The effect was immediate. Dozens of dragons taking flight and disappearing into the crystal formations with remarkable speed and coordination. This was clearly a species that had learned to hide when threatened, possibly from encounters with other hostile alien races. The military convoy arrived with the subtlety of a meteor impact, heavy assault vehicles surrounding the plaza, while armored troops deployed with weapons raised. Colonel Harrison emerged from the lead vehicle, his face showing disappointment at finding only a single human among the alien structures. He immediately ordered Marcus to surrender his research data and submit to debriefing, treating him like a criminal for supposedly compromising human security. What followed was a tense standoff that could have easily erupted into violence. The military had come prepared for war, equipped with weapons capable of leveling the entire Crystal City. They were searching for threats to justify their overwhelming response, but the dragons had vanished so completely that even thermal scanners could not detect their presence. Colonel Harrison grew increasingly frustrated as his teams found no evidence of the massive civilization Marcus had described. Marcus found himself caught between two worlds, trying to protect the dragons while convincing the military that peaceful contact was possible. He shared his experiences with the injured dragon, emphasizing the intelligence and cooperation he had witnessed. But the colonel was interested only in strategic assessments and resource evaluations, viewing the crystal formations as potential mining opportunities rather than artistic achievements. The situation reached a breaking point when military engineers began taking core samples from the crystal structures, causing harmonic disruptions that seemed to cause the formation's physical distress. The crystals were not merely artistic creations. They were living entities that formed the foundation of dragon society. Damaging them was equivalent to attacking the dragons' homes and possibly their family members. Marcus's former patient suddenly reappeared, landing in the plaza with a thunderous impact that sent several soldiers scrambling for cover. The dragon's posture was rigid with anger, its eyes blazing as it positioned itself between the military team and the damaged crystal formation. For the first time since Marcus had known the creature, it displayed the full majesty and terrifying power of its species. Colonel Harrison immediately ordered his troops to open fire, but Marcus threw himself between the weapons and the dragon, shouting for a ceasefire. The standoff stretched for several agonizing seconds before the dragon did something that surprised everyone present. It began to speak, not in its native musical tones but in halting, carefully pronounced human words. The dragon had been studying Marcus's language during their time together in the cavern, learning to mimic human speech patterns and gradually developing a vocabulary. Its first words to the assembled military force were simple but profound. "Why you hurt our home? Marcus friend, you not friend. Go away." The broken grammar only emphasized the tragedy of the situation. An ancient and sophisticated civilization reduced to pleading with invaders in their own language. The revelation that the dragons were capable of learning human speech changed the entire dynamic of the encounter. Even Colonel Harrison seemed shaken by the direct communication, though he quickly recovered his authoritarian composure. He demanded that the dragon surrender for questioning and submit to colonial authority, treating the creature like a conquered subject rather than a sentient being worthy of respect. Marcus realized that he was witnessing the beginning of a colonial nightmare that had played out countless times in human history, but this time humanity was cast in the role of the invaders. The dragons possessed knowledge and abilities that the administration would want to exploit, while their beautiful city offered resources that mining corporations would covet. Unless something changed dramatically, first contact would become first conquest. The dragon looked directly at Marcus, its amber eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and betrayal. It had trusted him, had allowed him to see the secret heart of its civilization, only to watch him lead destroyers to their doorstep. Marcus felt the weight of that accusation and knew that he had to find a way to make things right, even if it meant defying his own species' colonial ambitions. Marcus Chen had seen many strange things during his 3 years as a xenobiologist on the frontier planet, Kepler 442b. But nothing had prepared him for the sight that greeted him in the crystalline caverns beneath Mount Terminus. The creature lay crumpled against the far wall, its massive form casting twisted shadows in the pale blue light of his helmet lamp. At first glance, it resembled the dragons from ancient Earth mythology, but this was no fairy tale beast. The alien measured nearly 15 meters from snout to tail, covered in scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight black, depending on the angle of light. 6 powerful limbs extended from its serpentine body, each ending in claws that could easily tear through titanium plating. Most striking were the wings, gossamer membranes stretched between delicate bone structures that seemed almost too fragile for such a massive creature. One wing lay at an unnatural angle, clearly broken, while thick blue ichor pooled beneath the injured appendage. Marcus approached slowly, his scanner detecting elevated stress hormones and signs of severe blood loss. The creature's eyes, each the size of dinner plates and colored like liquid amber, tracked his movement with surprising intelligence. There was no aggression in that gaze, only pain and what appeared to be resignation. The xenobiologist had studied enough alien species to recognize when a creature was preparing to die. The dragon's breathing came in labored gasps, creating small clouds of vapor in the cold cavern air. Marcus noticed scarring along its flanks, old wounds that spoke of countless battles. This was clearly an apex predator, something that had ruled its domain until this injury brought it low. Standard protocol dictated that he should document the discovery and retreat to a safe distance. Command would want detailed scans and behavioral observations before determining whether the species posed a threat to human settlements, but Marcus had not become a xenobiologist to simply catalog dying aliens from afar. He activated his emergency medical kit, designed primarily for human use but containing broad-spectrum pain relievers and healing compounds that worked on most carbon-based life forms. The dragon watched with growing alertness as he unpacked surgical tools and bone-setting equipment. Working on an injured predator of this size was beyond dangerous. It was suicidal. The creature could easily kill him with a casual swipe of its claws or a snap of its powerful jaws. Yet something in those intelligent eyes convinced Marcus that the dragon understood his intentions. When he approached the broken wing, the creature actually shifted its position to give him better access, a level of cooperation that surprised him. The wing bones were compound fractures, the kind of injury that would permanently ground any flying creature. Marcus worked for hours in the dim cavern, setting bones with polymer splints and injecting healing accelerants into the surrounding tissue. The dragon remained perfectly still throughout the procedure, occasionally making soft rumbling sounds that reminded Marcus of a cat's purr. As he worked, Marcus found himself talking to the creature, explaining each step of the treatment process. The dragon's head would tilt slightly at certain words and its eyes never left his face. There was an unmistakable intelligence there, something that suggested this species might be more than just clever animals. When the immediate medical emergency was stabilized, Marcus faced a new problem. The dragon would need weeks of care to recover properly, and he could not possibly transport it to the research station. Instead, he made a decision that would have horrified his supervisors. He set up a temporary field camp in the cavern, using portable equipment to create a small living space while maintaining watch over his unusual patient. The following days established a routine that defied every xenobiological protocol in the handbook. Marcus would check the dragon's vital signs each morning, change bandages on its wounds, and ensure it had adequate food and water. The creature proved to be remarkably cooperative, allowing him to approach without any signs of aggression. When Marcus brought offerings of local fish from nearby streams, the dragon would eat directly from his hands, its massive head moving with surprising gentleness. Communication began with simple gestures and evolved into something more complex. The dragon would point with its snout toward areas of discomfort, or make specific vocalizations when hungry or thirsty. Marcus started to recognize patterns in its behavior, signs of a sophisticated intelligence that was actively trying to bridge the communication gap between their species. 3 weeks into the recovery process, Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. While examining cave paintings deeper in the cavern system, he found images that clearly depicted the dragons in flight, but not as solitary creatures. The paintings showed them in complex social groups, tending gardens of crystalline formations and engaging in what appeared to be ritual gatherings. This was not just an intelligent species, it was a civilization. The implications were staggering. Humanity had made first contact with dozens of alien species, but never before had they encountered another sapient race with such an advanced culture. Marcus realized that the creature he had been treating was not simply an injured animal, but a person, someone with thoughts, feelings, and perhaps even a family waiting for their return. As the dragon's wing healed and its strength returned, Marcus began to notice changes in its behavior. The creature would spend long periods staring toward the cavern entrance, making soft calling sounds that echoed through the tunnels. There was a longing in those vocalizations, a sadness that spoke of separation from loved ones. Marcus understood that his patient was homesick. The day finally came when the dragon tested its wing for the first time since the injury. The membrane stretched wide, catching the cavern's ethereal light and revealing patterns of bioluminescence that Marcus had never noticed before. The wing held strong, supporting the creature's weight as it performed careful exercises to rebuild its flight strength. Marcus knew their time together was coming to an end, but he felt a strange reluctance to see the dragon leave. Over the past month, he had grown attached to the magnificent creature, and he sensed that the feeling was mutual. The dragon would often rest its great head near Marcus while he worked, a gesture of trust that touched him deeply. On the final night before the dragon's departure, something extraordinary happened. The creature began to vocalize in a complex pattern of tones and harmonics that reminded Marcus of human speech. It was clearly attempting to communicate something important, but the meaning remained frustratingly beyond his comprehension. The dragon seemed to sense his confusion and instead performed an elaborate gesture, touching its snout to Marcus's forehead in what could only be described as a blessing or farewell ritual. The next morning, Marcus watched as the dragon spread its wings and took flight for the first time in over a month. The creature circled the cavern once before landing briefly near Marcus. It fixed him with those intelligent amber eyes one final time, then soared out into the dawn sky, disappearing beyond the mountain peaks. Marcus stood alone in the cavern that had been their shared home, wondering if he would ever see his remarkable patient again. 5 years had passed since the first diplomatic negotiations between humanity and the dragon civilization, and the relationship between the two species had evolved in ways that surprised both sides. Marcus had established a permanent research station at the border between human and dragon territories, serving as both a cultural exchange center and a symbol of the fragile cooperation that had developed. Despite initial mistrust and misunderstanding, the dragons had gradually opened their society to human visitors, allowing small groups of scientists and artists to study their biotechnology and harmonic engineering techniques. In return, selected dragons had visited human settlements to observe terraforming operations and agricultural methods, showing particular interest in humanity's ability to adapt hostile environments to support life. These exchanges had revealed that both species possessed valuable knowledge that could benefit the other, but progress toward full partnership remained slow and difficult. Corporate representative Walsh had been recalled to Earth after her aggressive negotiation tactics generated complaints from the Colonial Ethics Committee, replaced by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a xenocultural specialist with experience in peaceful first contact protocols. Dr. Rodriguez approached the dragon relationship as an opportunity to establish new models for interspecies cooperation rather than simply another resource extraction project. Her efforts had helped ease tensions and create frameworks for ongoing cultural exchange. The real breakthrough
came when the dragons requested human
assistance with a problem that their advanced biotechnology could not solve alone. A plague was spreading through the crystal formations that formed the foundation of dragon civilization, a crystalline virus that corrupted the harmonic resonances essential to dragon society. The living crystals were dying, and with them the infrastructure that supported millions of dragons across multiple continents. Marcus was among the first humans invited to study the crystal plague, working alongside dragon biotechnicians to understand how the infection spread and why it resisted traditional dragon healing methods. The research revealed that the virus had been artificially created, designed specifically to target the quantum resonance patterns that made dragon crystals unique. This was not a natural disease but a biological weapon, and there was only one species in the galaxy with both the knowledge and motivation to create such a weapon. The hegemony had found the dragons despite their careful concealment, and rather than launching a direct military assault, they had chosen a more insidious form of attack. The crystal virus would slowly destroy dragon civilization from within, weakening their defenses and forcing them to abandon their carefully cultivated refuge. The dragons faced a choice between fighting a war they might not win or watching their entire culture die from an invisible enemy. They could not directly confront Marcus, realized that this crisis represented both humanity's greatest challenge and its most important opportunity since first contact with the dragons. If humans could help solve the crystal plague, they would prove themselves worthy allies and establish the foundation for genuine partnership between the two species. But if they failed, or worse, if they were perceived as exploiting dragon vulnerability for their own benefit, the consequences could be catastrophic for both civilizations. The solution required combining human genetic engineering techniques with dragon harmonic technology, creating hybrid treatments that neither species could have developed alone. Marcus worked closely with his former patient, who had become one of the leading dragon experts on interspecies cooperation. Together, They developed protocols that used human-designed retroviruses to carry dragon harmonic signatures directly into infected crystal formations, essentially teaching the crystals to heal themselves while maintaining their essential quantum properties. The research process brought Marcus and his dragon partner closer than ever before, their professional collaboration deepening into a friendship that transcended species boundaries. They shared not just scientific knowledge but personal histories, cultural traditions, and philosophical perspectives that helped each understand the other's worldview. Marcus learned that dragons experience time differently than humans, perceiving past and future as interconnected harmonies rather than linear sequences, while his dragon friend gained insight into human creativity and adaptability. Their collaboration also revealed the true extent of dragon civilization's achievements. The crystal formations were not just homes or artistic creations, but sophisticated biotechnology that could manipulate space-time at the quantum level. The dragons had essentially learned to sing reality into new configurations, creating pocket dimensions, temporal stability fields, and even limited faster-than-light communication networks. Their technology was so advanced that it appeared magical to human observers, yet it operated according to scientific principles that humans were only beginning to understand. The crystal plague treatment proved successful, but the process of implementing it across dragon civilization required unprecedented cooperation between human and dragon technical teams. Humans provided genetic engineering expertise and manufacturing capabilities, while dragons contributed harmonic programming and biotechnological integration techniques. The joint effort created hybrid technologies that neither species could have achieved independently, pointing toward possibilities for future collaboration that excited scientists from both civilizations. As the crystal plague retreated and dragon civilization began to recover, Marcus's former patient made an announcement that surprised the entire interspecies community. The dragon revealed that during the medical crisis, it had been caring for a clutch of eggs that were nearing the hatching stage. These would be the first dragon hatchlings born since the establishment of human-dragon relations, and their upbringing would occur in a context where cooperation between species was normal rather than exceptional. The dragon asked Marcus to serve as a cultural teacher for the hatchlings, helping them understand human society and values, while they learned traditional dragon knowledge from their biological parent. This request represented an extraordinary honor and responsibility, making Marcus one of the first humans to be entrusted with the education of another species' children. It also demonstrated the depth of trust that had developed between him and his dragon friend despite the rocky beginning of their relationship. The hatching ceremony took place in the Great Crystal Amphitheater, where the diplomatic negotiations had first been held, attended by representatives from both human and dragon communities. 3 small dragons emerged from their crystalline eggs, their scales shimmering with colors that shifted between human visible spectrum and dragon-specific wavelengths. They were immediately responsive to both human speech and dragon harmonics, suggesting that they might become the first truly bilingual individuals of their species. Marcus watched the hatchlings take their first flight through the crystal formations, guided by their parent but curious about everything in their environment, including the strange bipedal creatures who had helped save their civilization from the crystal plague. The young dragons showed no fear of humans, approaching Marcus with the same trust and curiosity they displayed toward other dragons. They represented a new generation that would grow up knowing cooperation between species as a normal part of life rather than an extraordinary achievement. The ceremony concluded with a gift-giving ritual that formalized the partnership between human and dragon civilizations. The dragons presented humanity with a small crystal formation programmed with basic harmonic engineering principles, allowing human scientists to begin developing their own biotechnology based on dragon knowledge. In return, humans offered genetic engineering, tools and manufacturing technologies that would help dragons expand their biological capabilities beyond their current limitations, but the most significant gift was symbolic rather than technological. Marcus's former patient presented him with a small scale that had naturally shed during the healing process years earlier, explaining that in dragon culture, such gifts represented permanent bonds of friendship and mutual obligation. The scale would serve as both a memento of their shared journey and a commitment to continue working together regardless of political changes or cultural misunderstandings that might arise in the future. As Marcus held the iridescent scale in his hands, he reflected on the long journey from his first encounter with an injured dragon in a dark cave to this moment of celebration and partnership. The relationship between their species had survived mistrust, political manipulation, military aggression, and biological warfare to emerge stronger and more cooperative than anyone had initially thought possible. The three dragon hatchlings playing in the crystal formations represented hope for a future where different forms of intelligence could work together to create something greater than either could achieve alone. The dragons had rewarded Marcus's initial act of compassion with trust, knowledge, and ultimately with responsibility for helping raise the next generation of their species. In doing so, they had also given humanity a chance to prove that their species could evolve beyond its colonial instincts and learn to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than domination. The future would bring new. Marcus's return from the Dragon City triggered an immediate crisis at the human settlement. Corporate Representative Walsh accused him of treason for conducting unauthorized negotiations, while Colonel Harrison placed him under military arrest for violating security protocols. The information Marcus had gathered about dragon capabilities and intentions was classified as top secret, though both officials seemed more interested in suppressing his findings than understanding their implications. Dr. Winters managed to secure Marcus a hearing before the Colonial Review Board, a panel of officials empowered to make decisions about interspecies relations. Marcus used this opportunity to present a detailed report on dragon civilization, emphasizing their peaceful intentions and sophisticated culture. He argued that humanity had a chance to establish its first truly equal partnership with an alien species, but only if they abandoned their colonial approach in favor of respectful cooperation. The review board listened politely to Marcus's testimony, but their questions revealed their true priorities. They wanted to know about dragon military capabilities, resource production capacity, and potential weaknesses that could be exploited in future negotiations. The board members seemed incapable of viewing the dragons as anything other than obstacles to human expansion or assets to be acquired through diplomacy or force. Corporate Representative Walsh presented her own assessment, claiming that the dragons' withdrawal from contact proved they were planning hostile action against human settlements. She argued that preemptive military action was necessary to secure vital resources and protect human colonists from an alien threat. The fact that the dragons had never shown any aggression toward humans was dismissed as evidence of their deceptive nature, rather than their peaceful intentions. Marcus realized that the review board had already made their decision before hearing any testimony. The economic pressures from Earth's corporate sponsors were simply too powerful to ignore, and the dragons' advanced technology made them either valuable allies or dangerous enemies. Since the dragons were unwilling to submit to human authority, they would be classified as hostile and dealt with accordingly. The final blow came when the board revealed that they had been monitoring Marcus's communications with the dragons through hidden surveillance devices in his shuttle. They had recorded his conversations with the dragon elders, including discussions of dragon defensive capabilities and their plans to withdraw from human contact. This intelligence was being used to plan a military operation designed to capture key dragons before they could disappear entirely. Marcus was devastated to learn that his attempts at peaceful mediation had been exploited to gather intelligence. For a military assault, the dragons had trusted him with sensitive information about their society and technology, believing that he would use this knowledge to promote understanding between their species. Instead, human officials had turned his diplomatic mission into a reconnaissance operation that would facilitate the very conflict he was trying to prevent. The military operation launched at dawn 3 days later, with assault teams targeting specific locations in the Crystal City identified through Marcus's reconnaissance data. Colonel Harrison had planned a swift decapitation strike designed to capture dragon leaders while minimizing damage to valuable crystal formations. The operation was presented as a police action to secure dangerous aliens, rather than an invasion of a sovereign civilization. Marcus watched the assault from his detention facility, horrified to see human troops advancing through the Crystal City with weapons drawn. The dragons had not fled as expected, but neither were they offering resistance. Instead, they remained in their positions throughout the city, maintaining the harmonic resonances that kept their crystal formations healthy and vibrant. They were choosing to protect their homes, even at the cost of their own freedom. The first indication that something was wrong came when the assault teams reported communication failures and equipment malfunctions. The Dragon's harmonic defenses were more sophisticated than human intelligence had anticipated, creating interference patterns that disrupted electronic systems without causing permanent damage. Weapons would not fire, vehicles would not respond to controls, and even basic radio communication became impossible within the city limits. What followed was not a battle, but a profound demonstration of the difference between human and dragon approaches to conflict. The dragons could have easily killed or injured the attacking humans, but instead they simply rendered their technology useless while maintaining perfect control over their own domain. Human soldiers found themselves trapped in a city where they could not use their weapons, could not call for backup, and could not even navigate without the technological aids they had grown dependent upon. Marcus's former patient appeared in the plaza, where the main assault force had gathered, approaching the confused and frightened soldiers with obvious sadness rather than anger. The dragon spoke directly to Colonel Harrison in its carefully learned human language, asking why he had chosen violence when peaceful solutions were available. The colonel's attempt to justify the attack as a security operation rang hollow in the face of the dragon's dignified restraint. The dragon then did something that surprised everyone present, including Marcus, who was watching through surveillance feeds. It offered to surrender itself to human custody in exchange for the withdrawal of military forces from the Crystal City. The dragon was willing to sacrifice its own freedom to protect its people and their sacred homes, a gesture of nobility that shamed the human invaders who had come seeking conquest rather than justice. Colonel Harrison's response revealed the true nature of human colonial attitudes. He rejected the dragon's offer of surrender, demanding instead that all dragons submit to human authority and relocate to designated areas where they could be properly supervised. The colonel seemed genuinely unable to understand why an intelligent species would resist being conquered for their own good, viewing dragon independence as inherently threatening to human interests. The standoff continued for hours, with human forces trapped in a city where their technology was useless, while dragons maintained perfect order and control. No shots were fired, no violence occurred, but the message was clear. The dragons possessed capabilities that made human military superiority irrelevant. They had chosen not to use these abilities aggressively, but they were fully capable of defending themselves if necessary. Dr. Winters finally intervened by threatening to report the unauthorized military operation to Earth's Colonial Ethics Committee, a body with the power to override local officials in cases of gross misconduct. She argued that the attack on the Dragon City violated every principle of interspecies relations established by the United Earth government, and that continued aggression would result in criminal charges against all involved officers. The threat of legal action from Earth forced Corporate Representative Walsh to reconsider her aggressive approach. The potential profits from mining dragon crystals would be meaningless if the operation resulted in sanctions that damaged Earth's reputation among other alien species. Humanity's expansion into space depended on maintaining at least the appearance of ethical behavior, even when dealing with species that could not defend themselves against human technology. Colonel Harrison was ordered to withdraw his forces from the Crystal City, though he was allowed to maintain his forward operating base as a face-saving measure. The trapped soldiers were released unharmed by the dragons. Their weapons and equipment returned in perfect working order. The dragons had demonstrated both their defensive capabilities and their commitment to peaceful resolution, though it remained unclear whether this reprieve would lead to genuine negotiations or merely a postponement of inevitable conflict. Marcus was released from detention and assigned to serve as humanity's official liaison with the dragon civilization, though his authority was limited and his communications were subject to constant monitoring. He had become a bridge between two worlds. But he was also a prisoner of the political forces that sought to control the relationship between human and dragon cultures for their own benefit. As he prepared to return to the Crystal City for formal diplomatic talks, Marcus wondered whether he was facilitating genuine cooperation or merely providing a civilized facade for a colonial occupation that would proceed regardless of dragon wishes. The dragons had shown remarkable restraint in the face of human aggression, But even their patience might have limits. If humanity continued to view them as resources to be exploited, rather than people deserving of respect, the consequences could be catastrophic for both species. The formal diplomatic negotiations between humanity and the dragon civilization began 3 months after the failed military assault, held in a neutral location away from both the human settlement and the Crystal City. The dragons had constructed a magnificent meeting hall from living crystal that grew in spiraling patterns around a central amphitheater, creating acoustic properties that perfectly balanced human and dragon vocal ranges. The structure itself was a work of art that demonstrated the dragons' mastery of biotechnology and their commitment to creating beauty, even in functional spaces. Marcus served as the primary human representative, though Corporate Representative Walsh maintained ultimate authority over any agreements reached. The dragon delegation was led by 3 elders whose scales had taken on the deep golden hue that marked advanced age and wisdom among their species. Most significantly, Marcus's former patient served as the chief translator and cultural interpreter, having spent years studying human language and behavior since their first encounter. The negotiations revealed fundamental differences in how each species understood concepts like ownership, territory, and resource management. The dragons viewed themselves as stewards of Kepler 442b's ecosystem, rather than owners of specific areas, and they found human claims of territorial sovereignty both puzzling and concerning. They had evolved as a collective consciousness that made decisions through harmonic consensus, while humans operated through hierarchical authority structures that often prioritized individual or corporate interests over collective welfare. Corporate Representative Walsh approached the talks with standard colonial negotiation tactics, offering the dragons advanced human technology in exchange for mining rights to specific crystal formations. She seemed genuinely confused when the dragons politely declined her offers, explaining that they had no need for technology that would separate them from their natural environment. The dragons had developed their own biotechnology that worked in harmony with planetary ecosystems rather than attempting to dominate or reshape them. The dragons countered with their own proposals for cooperation, offering to share their knowledge of harmonic engineering and biotechnology. In exchange for human commitment to sustainable development practices, they demonstrated technologies that could enhance human agriculture, improve atmospheric processing, and even extend human lifespan through harmonic therapy. These gifts were freely offered without any expectation of material compensation, a concept that Corporate Representative Walsh found either naive or manipulative. Marcus found himself constantly translating, not just languages but entire worldviews, as each species struggled to understand the other's motivations and values. The dragons were genuinely puzzled by humanity's apparent desire to own and control everything they encountered, while humans could not comprehend why the dragons would offer valuable technology without demanding payment or guarantees of future cooperation. The breakthrough came when Marcus's former patient shared information that changed the entire context of the negotiations. The dragon revealed that Kepler 442b was not the dragon's original homeworld, but rather a carefully chosen refuge where they had fled after their original planet was destroyed by another spacefaring species. The dragons were themselves refugees who had learned the hard way what happened when aggressive civilizations encountered peaceful ones. The dragon elders provided a holographic record of their species' first contact with the hegemony, a militaristic alliance that had conquered dozens of worlds through a combination of superior technology and ruthless exploitation of local resources. The dragons had initially attempted peaceful cooperation with the hegemony, sharing their knowledge and technology in the hope of establishing mutually beneficial relationships. Instead, the hegemony had used this information to identify weaknesses in dragon defenses and strip mine their homeworld until it became uninhabitable. The revelation that the dragons were refugees rather than native inhabitants of Kepler 442b complicated human claims of territorial authority, but it also provided context for their defensive behavior and reluctance to trust human intentions. The dragons had witnessed the destruction of their original civilization and were determined not to allow history to repeat itself. Their withdrawal from contact with humans was not motivated by hostility but by painful experience with species who viewed cooperation as a sign of weakness to be exploited. Marcus realized that humanity was at a crossroads that would define their reputation throughout the galaxy. If they chose to follow the hegemony's example and exploit the dragon's peaceful nature, they would establish themselves as just another aggressive species interested only in conquest and resource extraction. But if they could demonstrate genuine respect for dragon sovereignty and culture, they might become the first species to establish truly equal partnership with the dragons since their original homeworld's destruction. Corporate representative. Walsh remained focused on securing mining rights and technology transfers, viewing the dragon's tragic history as leverage to be used in negotiations, rather than a warning about the consequences of colonial exploitation. She argued that humanity's offer of protection from the hegemony gave them the right to demand compensation in the form of crystal formations and biotechnology. The dragons, she claimed, should be grateful for human military protection rather than demanding equality in their relationship. The dragons' response to Walsh's protection offer revealed the depth of their strategic thinking and the extent of their hidden capabilities. The eldest dragon elder explained that the dragons had been monitoring hegemony movements for centuries and were well aware of their current location and intentions. The dragons had not chosen Kepler Form 42b as a hiding place, but as a strategic position that would force any attacking force to overextend their supply lines while fighting in terrain that favored dragon defensive advantages more. Shocking was the revelation that the dragons possessed weapons, technology far more advanced than anything humanity had developed, including gravity manipulation devices and quantum disruption fields that could disable entire fleets of attacking ships. They had refrained from using these weapons against the hegemony out of philosophical commitment to peaceful resolution of conflicts, but they were fully capable of defending themselves if necessary. Humanity's offer of military protection was not just unnecessary, but potentially insulting to beings who possessed superior defensive capabilities. The negotiations reached a crisis point when corporate representative Walsh accused the dragons of deception for concealing their advanced military technology during previous discussions. She argued that the dragons' failure to disclose their true capabilities constituted a breach of diplomatic protocol and justified human suspicion of their intentions. The dragons calmly pointed out that humans had also concealed information, including the surveillance devices that had recorded Marcus's private conversations and the military assault plans that had been developed even while peace talks were being arranged. Marcus found himself defending both sides against accusations of bad faith, while trying to prevent the complete breakdown of diplomatic relations. He argued that mistrust and deception were natural results of the colonial approach humanity had initially taken, and that genuine cooperation would only be possible if both species committed to complete transparency and mutual respect. The dragons had demonstrated their commitment to peace by refraining from using their superior technology aggressively, while humans could demonstrate theirs by abandoning territorial claims and accepting the dragons as equal partners, rather than subjects to be managed. The turning point came when Marcus's former patient made a personal appeal that transcended the formal diplomatic proceedings. The dragon reminded Marcus of their time together in the healing cave, when trust and cooperation had flourished because both beings focused on helping rather than exploiting each other. The dragon asked whether humanity was capable of extending that same compassion and respect to an entire civilization, or whether Marcus's kindness had been an isolated exception to human nature. The question forced Marcus to confront the fundamental choice facing his species. Humanity could continue down the path of colonial expansion that had characterized their history on Earth, viewing every encounter with other species as an opportunity for conquest and exploitation. Or they could evolve beyond their aggressive instincts and demonstrate that intelligence and technology could be used to create rather than destroy, to build bridges between civilizations rather than walls around human interests. The dragons' offer remained open despite human deception and aggression, but their patience was not unlimited. They were prepared to share their knowledge and establish genuine partnership with humanity, but only if humans could prove themselves worthy of trust. The dragons had learned from bitter experience that species unwilling to respect the sovereignty and dignity of others would eventually become enemies regardless of any temporary agreements reached through diplomatic negotiations. As the formal talks concluded, Marcus understood that the real negotiations were just beginning. The future relationship between humanity and the dragons would be determined not by corporate contracts or military treaties, but by the daily choices made by individu. The weeks following the disastrous first contact became a nightmare of bureaucratic maneuvering and military escalation. Colonel Harrison established a forward operating base at the edge of the Dragon Valley, positioning heavy weapons and surveillance equipment to monitor the Crystal City around the clock. The dragons had withdrawn deeper into their formations, creating barriers of harmonic energy that disrupted human scanning technology, but also demonstrated their advanced understanding of both physics and defensive strategies. Marcus found himself under virtual house arrest, confined to the research station, while colonial administration officials debated his fate. Some viewed him as a valuable asset who could facilitate communication with the dragons, while others considered him a security risk who had compromised humanity's strategic advantage through his unauthorized contact. The official narrative painted the dragons as a potential threat that required careful management, despite Marcus's repeated testimony about their peaceful nature and sophisticated culture. Dr. Sarah Winters, the station's chief administrator, was one of the few officials who seemed genuinely interested in Marcus's perspective. During their private conversations, she revealed that pressure was mounting from Earth's corporate sponsors to secure mining rights to the crystal formations. Preliminary analysis suggested that the living crystals contained rare elements essential for faster-than-light communication technology, making them incredibly valuable to humanity's expanding interstellar empire. The dragons, meanwhile, had not remained passive in the face of human aggression. Their withdrawal from the valley had been strategic rather than fearful, and they began demonstrating capabilities that made even the military reconsider their aggressive posture. Reconnaissance drones sent into the Crystal City would malfunction and return with their electronic systems subtly altered. Not damaged, but improved in ways that human engineers could not understand or replicate. More unsettling were the reports of dragons appearing at remote human settlements across the planet, always peaceful but clearly conducting their own intelligence gathering. They would observe farming operations, study terraforming equipment, and even approach individual colonists with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. These encounters were always brief and non-threatening, but they demonstrated that the dragons possessed surveillance capabilities that far exceeded human technology. Marcus begged for permission to serve as a mediator, arguing that his relationship with the dragons offered humanity's best chance for peaceful coexistence. But Colonel Harrison had his own plans for establishing dominance, plans that involved capturing and interrogating individual dragons to learn their weaknesses. The military had identified the dragon Marcus had healed as a high-value target, believing that its familiarity with humans made it either a valuable source of intelligence or a security threat that needed to be eliminated. The crisis escalated when corporate representative Jennifer Walsh arrived from Earth with a full diplomatic immunity status and authorization to negotiate resource extraction agreements. Walsh was a veteran of colonial expansion, who had overseen the profitable exploitation of dozens of alien worlds, always finding legal justifications for displacing native populations in the name of human progress. She viewed the dragons as an obstacle to be removed, rather than beings deserving of rights or respect. Walsh's first official act was to declare the crystal formations a strategic resource under colonial development authority jurisdiction, effectively claiming ownership of the dragons' city and homes. She offered the dragons a choice between peaceful relocation to designated reservation areas or forcible removal by military action. The ultimatum was delivered through loudspeakers positioned around the valley, as if the dragons were wild animals being warned away from human territory. The dragon response came 3 days later in a form that no one expected. Marcus was awakened in his quarters by Dr. Winters, who led him outside to witness something extraordinary. Hundreds of dragons filled the night sky above the research station, their bioluminescent wings creating patterns of light that resembled complex mathematical equations. They were not attacking or threatening, simply hovering in perfect formation while projecting what appeared to be a massive holographic display. The display showed the history of Kepler 442b from the dragon's perspective, images of their species evolving alongside the crystal formations over millions of years. It depicted their development of civilization, their achievements in biotechnology and harmonic engineering, and their careful stewardship of the planet's ecosystem. The message was clear. This was their world, their home, and they had been its guardians long before humanity arrived. But the most powerful part of the display showed recent events from the dragon's point of view. It depicted Marcus's discovery and healing of the injured dragon, emphasizing the compassion and respect he had shown during their time together. The dragons had been observing human behavior ever since, trying to understand whether Marcus's kindness represented typical human values or was merely an isolated exception. The holographic narrative then showed human military forces surrounding their city, weapons trained on sacred crystal formations that represented generations of artistic and spiritual achievement. It showed corporate representative Walsh claiming ownership of structures that were literally alive, homes and family members that could not be bought, sold, or relocated. The dragons were not asking for human mercy. They were demonstrating why they deserved respect as equals. Marcus realized that the dragons were making a final appeal to human conscience before taking more drastic action. They had the technological capability to defend themselves, but they were choosing to educate rather than retaliate. This was first contact, as it should have been, an exchange of knowledge and perspective between two intelligent species seeking mutual understanding. Corporate Representative Walsh, however, viewed the display as a propaganda exercise designed to manipulate human emotions. She ordered Colonel Harrison to prepare for immediate military action, claiming that the dragons' demonstration of advanced technology proved they posed an unacceptable threat to human security. The fact that the dragons had refrained from using their capabilities aggressively was irrelevant to Walsh's colonial mindset. Marcus finally convinced Dr. Winters to allow him to attempt direct communication with the dragons, arguing that humanity's reputation as a spacefaring civilization was at stake. If word reached Earth that their first encounter with an intelligent alien species had resulted in unnecessary conflict, it would damage humanity's credibility with other potential allies among the stars. More importantly, it would be morally wrong to destroy a peaceful civilization for the sake of mining profits. Dr. Winters secretly provided Marcus with a communication shuttle and authorized him to make contact under the pretense of conducting a final intelligence assessment. Marcus flew directly to the Crystal City, landing in the same plaza where he had first encountered the dragon community. His former patient was waiting for him, along with several other dragons whose scales bore the distinctive patterns of advanced age and wisdom. The injured dragon he had healed approached Marcus with obvious relief and gratitude. It had learned much more human language during their separation and could now communicate in complete sentences, though its voice carried the musical harmonics natural to its species. Marcus' friend returned. We hoped you would come. Your people prepare war. Why do they hate us when we offer friendship? The question struck Marcus like a physical blow because he had no good answer. Humanity's colonial history was filled with similar encounters where superior technology was used to justify conquest and exploitation. The dragons were asking him to explain behavior that he found equally incomprehensible and morally reprehensible. Marcus spent hours with the dragon elders, learning about their culture and sharing what he knew about human society and politics. The dragons expressed genuine puzzlement about humanity's apparent obsession with ownership and resource extraction, concepts that had no equivalent in their communal civilization. They had offered to share their knowledge freely, but humans seemed interested only in taking what they wanted by force. As their conversation continued, Marcus realized that he was not just serving as a translator between two species, but as a bridge between two fundamentally different ways of understanding existence itself. The dragons saw themselves as part of a living ecosystem that included the crystal formations, the planet's atmosphere, and even the cosmic forces that shaped their world. Humans, by contrast, viewed themselves as separate from and superior to their environment, with the right to reshape entire worlds according to their needs and desires. The dragons had been hoping that Marcus's compassion represented humanity's true nature, but the military response had forced them to reconsider their assessment. They were now preparing to defend themselves not through violence, but through withdrawal from contact with humans entirely. If humanity wanted their planet's resources, they would have to take them from a world where the dragons no longer existed to provide guidance or wisdom.